All right, I'm going to continue with Jack's story here. This will actually appear a week later for you, but since I'm talking about him, I'll finish talking about him. So back to Jack here, back to Jack Kilby. What happens with Jack? Well, let's go back to the computer timeline here. Steve's place. So we bring out they bring out the Commodore PET, not the Apple. So we come down here, Commodore PET 77, and then we come down further, and let's see when our next Commodore gets produced. Look at all the ones that get produced in 78. You actually will have an assignment where you get to look at these. The Z80 became a computer that was something a lot of people used. TSR-80 comes out. I don't have too much on them, but they come out. This is their own system. It's not IBM compatible. Basically, Radio Shack, right, selling all the chips, starts selling. This is a Model 2 TSR-80. That was a very popular one at the time. And also in 79, the Atari 400. That's what it looked like. And this is a big, actually, let me mention this on, on Jack Kilby's second boot here. This is something that really kills him, right? So you've got the Atari 2600, which they don't consider a computer. It's not on here. The Odyssey 2 is. They consider that a computer. Anyway, I'm rambling. The Atari 400 comes out, and they don't make it compatible with Atari 2600 game cartridges. Yeah, so I talked about the fact, and you should have watched that by now, the fact that they had all these compatibility issues. And well, this is one of them, right? Now, this is one that is just absolutely stupid. Basically, what they did was they come out with a MOS 6502 computer, so you're basically dealing with pretty much the same computer as Commodore, but it doesn't have something called a SID chip in it, and so it's a little less cool as far as gaming and stuff. And they bring this out, and this is going to be their cheaper model. It's an 8-bit computer, and you could have 8K base, and then you could upgrade it. But again, you'll notice, hey, it's got this door that opens, and you put in this cartridge, and these are the cartridges for it. Yeah, these cartridges were not 2600 cartridges. Now, if you don't remember, the 2600 is the biggest game machine at that time. So in 1977, so 2 years prior, they are just going gangbusters, right? I remember that I had a friend that got one around 1980 or something. It's still going crazy. You know, there's just games, and it's so popular. They didn't understand that instead of trying to just get new people on board, right? Come buy this, or make the other 2600 people buy a 400 or an 800. They just made another system. So what do I mean by that? Well, gosh, think about what it would have been if basically these took Atari 2600 cartridges and ran them, which they could have. They could have done that. They could have, by that point, they could have put some 2600 components in there and the thing would have worked. Then you would have been saying, hey, look, this runs all this mess. I mean, we've got 10,000 games for the Atari 2600. This will run every single one of them, and it's a computer. So buy it, right? And then the people that want to upgrade would upgrade, and the people that didn't want to upgrade wouldn't. Parents are dealing with kids, right? What do I need to get? I don't know. There's some game thing, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what they're talking about. What should we do? I don't know. Oh, give me the 2600. There's actually people that were really ticked off when they bought one of these and then realized they couldn't play any of their 2600 stuff on it. Now, the Atari 800, this was a much more expensive model. It also ran a 6502, but it was a higher clock rate, so it was faster. Still 8 base, 8K and 48K, and you could put 2 cartridges in it. And when you look at those cartridges, they're 2600 cartridges. Right, so we can deal with that. We can go that. But wait a minute, I have to pay $1,000 to get that option, right? So you're dealing with this problem of, yeah, it was more costly to put it in there, but what they should have done, right, is just consolidated their effort and said, we don't have an 800, and we don't have a 400. We have one single model, and it will do what our 2600 does. Buy it, right? And that would have been a smoother transition, but they didn't understand it. Or maybe business people thought, no, this is way we'll upsell them, we'll get more money because they will want to do that. No, not necessarily, right? And so that's these 400 and 800 right here. That's when they come out. There's more TSR 80s. The TSR 80s were really, really popular. So linking those together, there's a Fairchild board that came out then. Anyway, there's a TSR 80 Model 3 for businesses. They were pretty big. They were pretty big. Even a TSR 80 Pocket Edition, which was a little computer. That was pretty cool. And then we get to 1981. And this is really where things kick in. So Commodore decides that, hey, our pet's getting dated. We need to go color. We need to have something more powerful. So there's that 6502 processor again. And look at the price, $300. So let's compare other systems like the TSR 80 Color. Right, so $399, and you see that. And they're using a Motorola, actually, that's a little slower. So we're going to see that. Now, if we take a look at the Model 80, this one's more expensive because it's actually doing more. It's got a Z-Log 2 megahertz system in it. We'll talk about Osborne some other time. There's the IBM PC that comes out. Then notice the price, right? So the 5150, I don't know if Van Halen named their album after that. Probably not, but there's the IBM. Their first entry is basically in 1981, no color, no sound, just beep. That's all it does. Pretty expensive, but compared to what they did before, yeah, so much cheaper. Let's move on down because there's something big that happens. Basically, what happens is the VIC-20 is really, really cool, but they run into a problem. And the problem is that all of a sudden in 1981, this VIC-20 that has a VIC chip in it, that's what it was aimed for, the RAM is not enough. So what's affecting the industry that they are unaware of, right, in this list that we have, is that we need tons more RAM. So it showed you the Ataris and they've got 48K, crap, not enough RAM, we need more. They went from needing around 16K or 16,000 bytes of RAM to needing at the low end 64,000 bytes of RAM. Why? Programming, right? So nobody had experienced this. Nobody knew that this was going to happen, but Commodore was really quick to pick up on it. So they went really quickly from a VIC that had 32, I think, or 28, something like that, to 64. So that's why when you look at that, it looks like their other computer. Yeah, basically they just reused the cases and they just changed the motherboard inside. And now they had a much more capable computer that could do all sorts of stuff. And they read this right. They looked and said, gosh dang, these people are hungry for RAM. So we better put 64K. That's why Commodore 64 was denoting 64K of RAM in that. That is awesome. Now, of course, now it isn't, but let's look at the IBM. See, the RAM was 16K. That's what it came with. The max that you could put in was 640K. Now, that would have been a machine that would cost like $6,000, $7,000. So people were not doing that. But still, if I'm going to compare my product to this really expensive product, I'm going to go, that stupid green screen. It only comes with 16K. How much did that cost you? $1,500. Wow. I went out and down a Commodore 64. It's got 64K of RAM, and it can do sound and color, and wow, so much stuff. Now they don't have a ton on here because we got a massive page that has everything on it. Because Commodores were huge. This Commodore 64 was the machine. So what was happening at the time, Commodore, or Jack Trammell and Chuck Peddle were able to look and say, you know what? We need color, we need sound. That's where things are going. We need memory so that people can run the programs and make programs much better and much bigger than what we've ever had. Right? How many sales? We know 9 million, maybe much more than that. And then, of course, you had to buy a screen, you had to buy a floppy disk, and then you could you could actually use the thing, right? So this one becomes huge. That one is, you know, again, 1982. When you're looking at the other makers that come along, like here's the Atari 1200X, that's $900. It is almost twice as fast, but there's that 64K. It's like, which one should I buy? So this Atari 1200 was actually done because, right, the 400 and 800 they were miserable. They did not produce what they needed to. They were not what they needed. So, hey, I can get a 1200, I can run all my 2600 stuff, plus have better graphics and do everything that I want to do. But if I'm really going to go out and buy one, do I really want to pay that much more over a Commodore 64 that was cheaper? So they looked at the information that they had available at sales and then looked and said, what do people want? And then they gave it to them, and that made it hugely successful. So Jack Tramiel ends up being forced out. So to end his story, I shouldn't say he's forced out. There was a guy that was his backer. So basically Jack Tramiel was the CEO, but the other guy owned most of the company. And what was happening, according to his own words when he talked about the situation, he said that basically the guy was flying around on Commodore's money, which was not right, which it isn't. You know, that stuff gets caught in accounting. He's like, I'm not going to sit here and watch you do this. And he's like, well, I'm going to keep doing it, so whatever. So then Jack was like, I'm out, I'm leaving. And he goes over and actually buys Atari. So he outright buys Atari because by this time, Atari's just tanking. It's not 82 by now, but it's like 84 or something like that. They're just tanking. And so he buys Atari trying to save, you know, get into the computer business. And of course, Commodore then from that point starts to go downhill because the people up on top are just only really worried about making money, and they don't see what their engineers are doing. So you still got those awesome engineers that are creating these things, and then, you know, Commodore doesn't know what to do with them. And so their height is the Commodore 64, and then it just starts going down after that point because you lost the guy that helped create it, helped keep it focused, and helped it moving forward. And the sad news is because of when he comes into Atari and tries to resurrect them, it's really too late. He does quite a bit to try to resurrect them. I think in 85, 86. Right, so this is the Amiga comes out from a Commodore because they buy a company. Matter of fact, I'll tell you that little story real quick. And then the Atari ST, which they don't have. We don't have a picture for it. That's interesting. Oh no, that's the Atari ST book. So the Atari ST must be up here. I'm missing it somewhere. There's a Stacy. Let's see, I have one of these sold for quite a bit. Anyway, it's not important for me to find that. It's interesting what happens because Jack, one of the things that really kicks him in the butt here is, right, his persona has got around, and engineers don't want to work with him because engineers want to do their own thing and they want to make what they're going to make, and they're the geniuses, and they are. And so what happens is these people, let me show you, these people come out and they make the Amiga 1000, and I mentioned this someplace that this operating system is just phenomenal. What they do with this Amiga and its fact that it's got 3 processors is incredible. And so they are put in a situation where they literally have no money left. And so what they do is they create Jack Tramiel basically says, okay, well, I'll give you a loan for $250,000, I think it was. And that'll carry you through till this time. But if you can't pay me back by that time, then basically I own your company. They didn't want to be owned by Jack Tramiel. They did not want Jack Tramiel to own what they were making. As a matter of fact, it's 85. That's kind of stupid. There's the Atari ST. That's a 520 ST, that's right. So what ends up happening is they go over to Commodore, right? So Jack's left and he was going to own Amiga. and he's like days away from owning Amiga. And then they go into Commodore and says, hey, Jack's going to buy us out for this ridiculous amount, and we really need somebody to buy us. And they show them the technology, right? And they're pissed off at Jack for leaving. So they're like, Amiga, we'll buy you right now. And the sad thing for those people are, this is where it is right there, the 1000, is that even though they didn't like Jack, and Jack was very heavy-handed in trying to take their company, they would have been better off if they went with Atari, because this Amiga ends up being sold through basically a company of business guys who, they're just there to fly a free plane and get free trips and do that kind of thing. And so the Amiga comes out and it's an incredible machine. And, basically you're dealing with a less capable Mac computer that's outselling them hands down. Right. And then Windows, 3.1 finally comes out and it's outselling them, all because now the people that end up owning this computer don't really care. And the guy that ends up making it is like gone within a couple of years because he's not getting anywhere. But if they just let Jack take it, right, he would have taken that and thrown it into the stratosphere, because he would have been, how cheap can we make this sucker? Let's get it everywhere. And yeah, it would have been phenomenal. So he ends up making, and I'll end it here because I know you guys are really bored with this. He ends up making that Atari ST 520. And it is a comparable machine. It's really good. If you look at the specs, you'll see that. And that's only because he took Chuck Peddle with him and he was able to get some stuff going. But he's never able, Amiga becomes his big competitor, and he's never able to beat them because of how awesome that Amiga was from the get-go. So by the time he finally catches them, the war is kind of over, and IBM won. Well, Microsoft and the compatibles won, and there's no more room for anybody else. Anyway, sorry to take so long on that. I did kind of ramble. I'm sorry. I try not to do that. I try to be a lot more straightforward in the stuff that I'm talking about. But Chuck and Jack are two awesome people that really, really changed things. And no, I did not know that at the time. Just kid, and didn't know anything about any of that. But I'm glad I do now. And again, we'll start summing all this up so you begin to understand, okay, this is information that's valuable for me to know. So thanks for watching.